Welcome back, 412 Youth Middle Schoolers. We're so glad to have you back for another Wednesday night lesson. As always, we're going to start with our base scripture, which is 1 Timothy 4:12, and this is out of the New King James Version. It says, "Let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, in purity."
So last week we talked a lot about how integrity can mean a lot of things, including standing up for what is right or not giving into pressure from outside influences, whether it be people or circumstances. And then we talked about Daniel and the lion's den and how Daniel was not pressured into doing what he knew was wrong because of the circumstances that might come against him if he stood up for what he believed in. And he kept on. He kept walking in integrity, and God saw him through for that. And so this week we want to talk about keeping your word, even if it means personal inconvenience or harm, and what that looks like.
Right, so we're going to start with a modern day version of integrity. And it's going to be back in 2005. There was a tennis player. His name's Andy Roddick. He was, playing in a tournament in Italy. And so in this tournament, he was the top seed. He's supposed to win. He's supposed to do all these things. And so during the tournament, or during this match, he was to the point where the next point he got won the match. And so during the play, there was his opponent made a hit, and it was ruled out by the judge. And so the judge ruled that the match was over, that Andy had won, everything was great for him. The opponent had even actually come to the net to shake his hand, signifying that the match was over. But what Andy did was he had noticed that the spot was actually on the line, which was in, so that his opponent actually got the point. And so he told the judge, "Hey, this is where it hit. You can come see it. It's in." And so the judge ended up ruling that it was in. They reversed the decision. And so they went on, continued to play. And actually what ended up happening was Andy Roddick lost. He ended up losing the match after it was all said and done. He had practically had it won, was given the win already, but he knew in his heart and in his mind that was not a correct ruling. And so he decided to do the right thing and say, "Hey, no, this is legit." And so in the end, he lost tens of thousands of dollars, and possibly more, because he could have went on and won the whole tournament. And so he ended up losing not just the match, but a lot of money in the end for him. But the integrity was clearly more important to Andy Roddick than any win or any money or anything like that. So what he ended up winning that day was setting really a great example for sportsmanship for all competitors everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, he really stood up. To him, what was more important than even this is his career. That's how he made money, was playing tennis and winning tennis matches. And it was still more important to him being truthful and fair and having that integrity kept up in his life than the money that he would have gotten from that match. And that really, really says a lot. And so we want to look at now a biblical example of integrity and really putting this person really put their life on the line to continue doing what was right. And so what the person we're going to talk about is Ruth in the Bible. It's a really very short book at the beginning of the Bible, and it's only a few pages long, so I encourage you to go back and read the whole book. It's very, very good. But it starts out talking about a famine that was happening in the land of Judah. And so that means that like a lot of times a drought where there's no rain will cause a famine, where the crops aren't growing, so there's not food to be had. People are going hungry. And so in the land of Judah, that's kind of what was happening. And there was a man named Elimelech, and his wife Naomi. And they had 2 sons who they lived in Judah, but then they moved to Moab, which is a different country, because of the famine. They were escaping the famine. And they settled in Moab, and then the sons named Mahlon and Chilion, when they grew up, they married women who were born in Moab. They were Moabite women, and their names were Orpah and Ruth. And so after the father, Elimelech, died, Naomi was then taken care of by her sons and their wives. And this went on for about 10 years because she was a widow, so then she had to be taken care of. So her sons and their daughters took care of her for about 10 years. But then Mahlon and Chilion died. It doesn't say how, it just says they died. If they died at the same time like that, chances are it might have been in some kind of military something. But that left Naomi and her daughter-in-laws, Orpah and Ruth, without anyone to take care of them. And so Naomi decided to go back to her home in Judah. She had heard from other people that the crops were doing much better, that the land was prospering again. And so she said, the best thing for me to do is to go back to my home in Judah. And so she started out to go. Well, Orpah and Ruth, her daughter-in-laws, went with her. And they traveled down the road toward Judah together. But then Naomi told them they needed to go back to their home because they could go back to Moab and have their families take care of them. And they were still young. They could possibly even get remarried and start a whole new life and be taken care of. Well, Orpah and Ruth they loved Naomi. They had lived with her for several years and they really loved her and they wanted to stay with her. So they told her, no, we want to stay with you. And so then they all wept together because Naomi really didn't want them to leave. They didn't want to leave her. But after some convincing, finally Orpah decided to go back to her family. She decided that was the best option for her. And she told Naomi bye and she left to go back to Moab. But Ruth refused to go. She would not. She even physically clung to Naomi. She hugged her and wouldn't let her go. And she said, and this is a very famous scripture, it's Ruth 1:16 and 17. And she said, don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us. So she was not leaving Naomi to go by herself to this other country.
Right. So Ruth went with Naomi to Judah and continued to look after her, worked hard to provide for her the best she could. So God blessed Ruth Ruth's faithfulness by causing her to meet a man named Boaz. And he's very kind to her. Boaz and Ruth eventually marry, and Ruth has a son whose name is Obed. Ruth continued to take care of Naomi, and Naomi got to love and help raise Obed as if he was her own child. And Obed actually grows up to become the father of Jesse, who is the father of David, King David.
King David.
So Ruth made a promise to Naomi that she would stay with her even when Naomi tried to tell her she'd be better off going back to her family. In that time and culture, the men took care of the family. They owned the property, made trades, deals, learned and worked in skilled trades, all that type of stuff. The women always took care of the home and the children. So it's very difficult and highly unlikely for a woman to keep a home or take care of herself without a husband, son, brother, some male family member to provide for them.
And remember, Naomi was a widow, but her sons took care of her for several years when her husband died. And when they died, neither her nor her daughters-in-law had anyone to provide for them any longer. And that's why it was so important to Naomi that Orpah and Ruth go back to their parents' homes and try to get remarried. She didn't want them to become homeless or hungry, which was not an uncommon for widows with no other men in their families to take care of them. Orpah decided to go back to her parents, and that decision made the most sense. She had family back in Moab to return to for security. She very much loved Naomi, but it did not look like there could be a real future for a Moabite widow in a foreign country, which she would have been a foreigner in Judah. Even if there were anyone to take care of Naomi in Judah, there was no guarantee that they would also take in her foreign widowed daughters-in-law. And so Orpah made the difficult decision to return to Moab. But Ruth stayed. She made a promise to Naomi that she would go with her no matter the cost. Her love for her mother-in-law outweighed whatever personal harm may come to her from her decision. She said, "Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I live. Your people will be my people will be my people, and your God will be my God." She stayed with Naomi, and she cared for her.
Right. Ruth also could have gotten to Judah and found a husband there and started a whole new life and let Naomi fend for herself in her homeland. That's what she was setting out to do anyways. But Ruth did. Every action she took, every move she made was with Naomi in mind. She would even save some of her meals while she was working the fields to bring back to Naomi at night so she could eat as well. Ruth stayed faithful to the promise and walked in love and integrity, even though she could have done what looked like what was best for herself and went home to her family. God saw that faithfulness and blessed her greatly. She met a very kind man, Boaz, and married him. Not only were Ruth and Naomi blessed and taken care of the rest of their lives, Ruth became the great-grandmother of King David and ancestor to Jesus.
Yes. So that just goes to show that we have absolutely no idea what is on the other side of our faithfulness and integrity. Had Ruth went back to Moab with Orpah and done what Naomi wanted her to do, she would have never met Boaz. She would have never been able to take care of Naomi. She would have never had Obed, who would have never had Jesse, who would have never had King David. Then there would have been nobody for Jesus to come from. These are all Jesus's ancestors. And so because of Ruth's integrity, her heart to keep her word to Naomi and to walk in the love that she knew she had, is essentially Jesus came from all of that. It's always, always, always more important to keep your word and do what you know in your heart is right than to choose a path that may look better for you but goes against your word.
Right. So that's going to do it for tonight's lesson. We believe and trust that you got something out of this. We love you, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. So again, we love you, and see you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.